Hey friends, what's up? In a previous video we made an awesome screen recorder using browser APIs and Svelte, and then we made this video converter to convert WebM files to MP4 files. You can see if I drag this video, it's going to start to convert it, so you can watch those videos if you want. But in this video I want to explore how to make a progressive web app. So I want this app to be available offline, and I also want to be able to install it. As you can see, I'm going to have this icon here to install it. So you're going to get this prompt to install the app, and you can install it if you want. But let me show you. If I go to the network tab, if you refresh the page, everything works great. But if you put it in offline mode, it's also going to work. So I can refresh the entire page. I can load in the video, so it's going to start converting it. And how beautiful is that, friends? Alright, but before I get started, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support me by becoming a patron. Alright friends, so this is going to be specific to SvelteKit, so you can follow along by creating a SvelteKit project if you want, but in case you followed along in the previous video, I didn't change a lot here to this video converter. The only difference I made is I downloaded the Fmpeg core and Wasm, so I included it inside of the static folder, just so I don't have to depend on some CDN, right? And that's basically it. So we can get started, right? And the first thing you're going to do is, of course, read the documentation. So we can go to the SvelteKit documentation and we can read upon service workers. Alright, so what are service workers? And if you aren't familiar, basically a service worker is a background task that runs in the browser. So this makes JavaScript multi-threaded. And there's really a lot of awesome examples of service workers. There's even things like Cloudflare workers. So they took the web standard for service workers and they turned it into a JavaScript runtime. And you maybe heard of things like PartyKit, so they use it to load analytics in the background and etc. So service workers are really useful for a lot of things. But in this case, we're going to use service workers to make a progressive web app. And I'm going to share these resources in the description, so you can read about progressive web apps on MDN, and they have here guides you can read upon if you want. So that's really awesome, but I highly recommend you read this. So you can go to web.dev/learn-PVA. So this is literally an entire course on progressive web apps. So you can learn a lot. So for example, here, if you're not familiar with service workers, we can open it here, and here they have this useful diagram how service workers work. So this is your client or app, right? And then a service worker is just like a man in the middle, so it can intercept every request. Maybe you also heard about mock service workers, so you can mock things with that and etc. You can literally do anything with service workers. And SvelteKit also makes it really simple to use service workers. So the only thing we have to do in SvelteKit, we have to include the service-worker.js or TS file in the source directory, and SvelteKit is going to automatically register it. So usually you would have to do something like this, where you have to register the service worker yourself, but in this case, SvelteKit is going to do the job for us. And then I'm just going to go over this entire example that they show here, how to use a service worker. So I'm going to explain these parts, and you're going to see how actually simple it is, and we don't have to use any third-party library to make it, in quotes, easier, because to be honest, every third-party library I use that helps you with service workers is so complicated and annoying to use, right? And you're going to see how actually simple this is. And I might even talk about Vite PVA. So this is this awesome Vite plugin for making simple PVAs. Again, I don't think it's really ready. It's version 0.2, right? Not even 1. And I had just a bunch of problems trying to use this. But we're actually going to use another part of this, which is the CLI for creating assets for your progressive web app, which is really awesome. So we're going to look into that. But yeah, I think that's it for the introduction, so we can get started. Alright friends, so let's create this service worker. So inside of our SvelteKit project, go to source, and we can just create this file. So I'm going to name it service-worker.ts. And that's basically it. Alright, so service workers are intimidating at first, but there's actually just 3 steps to this. So first we need to install the service worker, and then we need to activate it. So we have to say activate service worker. And then when we do this, we can intercept any traffic, so we can listen to fetch events. And then we're going to override the URL with our cache, and that's how you're going to get offline mode. So that's really simple like that. And then later I'm also going to show you how you can communicate from your service worker, so you can notify the user that there's an update so they can reload the page. Alright friends, but first I'm going to add some types, and all of this code comes from the SvelteKit documentation. So we can say // then let's open this tag, we can say reference types, and the types come from svelte.js/kit. Then we can close this. So if you get this proper syntax highlighting, you've done it right. And for this one, we can say lib web worker. And let me show you this in a doc. So you can go here to the type safety section. Here it is. You can see you don't actually need all of these types, but that might depend on your situation, right? And then they type the service worker here by saying const service worker equals self as a known as service worker global scope. But actually there's an easier way to type this. So I find this way more convenient. We can just say declare let self, and we can just say service worker global scope, because I actually don't want to reassign sv from service worker and then I have to use sv dot. You're going to see it's going to be way easier to use this way. And you also get some awesome helpers from SvelteKit. So if we go here to their example, at the top, you can see we get this build. So this is going to be your build file, so your static folder, and the version from $service worker. And this is really important, the version for the cache. So next time we update the service worker, is going to have another version, so it's going to know there's an update, right? And let me show you how awesome this is. So you can say import, so build files and version from. So just so you have these awesome stores like $app environment, etc., you have this awesome service worker store. And then we can even console log it out. So you can say build files version, and we can save it. And now our service worker should be automatically registered. So now when I go to my app, I'm going to open the developer tools. As you can see here, there's already an output, so we can look at it. So you can see here right now the build is empty because we're not building anything, right? And then we can see our static folder. So here's the favicon, my ffmpeg, and etc. And you can see here is the version. But the most important tab which you're going to use is going to be applications. You can see here is the service worker. So here is going to be registered, updated, and etc. So for example, if you make any change and update the service worker, you can say console log hi, for example, you're going to see in a second this is going to update and it's going to try to activate this one. But as you can see, it first installs and then it waits on the activation. And the reason it doesn't activate immediately, because you have to be done with this tab. So you actually have to close this tab. As you can see, refresh is not going to work. So you can refresh as many times as you want. So you have to actually close this tab and open a new one, or you can say skip waiting, and you're going to get the newest service worker. And you can, of course, unregister the service worker if you're trying something out, right? And then you can register it again if you reload the page. So that's how awesome that is. And if you want to make things simple for yourself during development, you can say update on reload. So I can put an exclamation mark and you can see the service worker is going to get updated. And you can also see we can enable offline mode. So this is going to make our page offline. Now you can see it's not going to work. If I refresh the page, we're going to get that no internet warning, right? So you can do that if you want. I'm going to disable it for right now. And if you screw things up, right, and want to have a complete refresh or restart, right, you can go here. Let me just scoot this up. You can go to storage and you can unregister your service worker and you can clear the site data. So now you're going to start fresh. And another important thing is your cache storage. So when we add the cache in a bit, it's going to appear here. And I also mentioned that all of the links are going to be included in the description. So really, this is a really awesome resource, debug progressive web apps. So actually, when you look at something like this panel, right, it has like a lot of these options, which can be overwhelming, right? And you don't have to know what they all do, right? But this is really a useful post which explains all of these options and what they do if you're interested. So I'm going to include that so you can have a read if you want. Awesome, so let's go back to our code, and the first thing we're going to do is install the service worker, which is already done for us, but we're going to listen when it's installed, and then we're going to add the files to the cache. And let me just scroll up, and then I'm going to say self. So this is a reference to the service worker, just like you have this or global this, right? We can say self, and then we can add an event listener. So going to listen when the service worker is installed, and then we're going to get an event. And now we're going to create this async function, add files to cache. And again, this is just the same code from the SvelteKit documentation. And we can just say const cache, and we can say await. So you have this caches API, which you have to open first. So we have to say caches open, and then we can pass in the cache. So let's create the cache. So I'm going to say const cache like this. And then let's use template tags, and then we can say cache, and we can give it a version. So we're going to use $sign, and let's use the version from the import. So that's simple as that. And let's also create assets. So we can say assets. So this is just going to be an array. So we can spread our build files and we can spread our static files. So you can cache whatever you want here. As you can see, SvelteKit doesn't have any abstractions for making progressive web apps, which is really awesome. I can guarantee you this is way simpler than wasting an hour trying to figure out some other abstraction, which is always a headache, to be honest. And another benefit of this is that you actually understand what's going on, because you can actually easily screw things up if you overcache, and then you're going to get into a disaster because your user isn't going to get the freshest content and etc. But this way you're actually going to know what you're doing. Alright, so when we open the cache, now we can say await cache, and we can use this API add all, and we can add our assets. Boom, that's how simple that is. So now we can use this event, wait until, and now we can just say add files to cache. Awesome, that's it. So now let's save this and let's look at our app. So now if we refresh, and now we can see we have something in our cache storage. So now we can open the cache and we can see, it cached all of our files, right? And now when you have a build, it's going to cache that and it's going to work beautifully. Alright, but we're going to run into a problem. So if we keep adding to this cache each time we activate, we actually need to make sure that we clear the cache, right? So that's what we're going to do in the activation phase. So here where we activate the service worker, we can say self add event listener. It's going to be activate, and then again we get this event, and we're going to create this async function, delete all caches, and it's real simple. So we're going to loop over the keys. So you can say for const key of, we can await caches key, so we get all the keys, right? And the key in this case is the version number, right? So we can say if key doesn't equal cache, so if this is a new fresh cache, right? We're just going to say await caches delete key, and actually it's a function delete key like this. So we can just pass it the key and we're going to delete this cache. So if I save this and we can go to our service worker, right? So we're going to skip the waiting and we're going to see our cache looks great. And we should also again use this event, wait until, and then we can say delete all caches, boom. So wait until is just going to let the service worker know to not do anything until this is done, right? So that's basically that. Alright, so now is actually the last part. So here in our app, we actually need to intercept this network traffic, right? So as you can see here, you have a bunch of things and you can intercept anything you want, right? So if we go to our application here, so now we need to intercept those things. So where we have this cache, and then first we're going to try if there is a network, right? So we're going to do that first. If there's no network, we're just going to serve the cache. So that's basically what we're going to do. And we can go right here. So now to do that, we just listen to the fetch event. And I told you, this really isn't that intimidating. We can say fetch, and we can also pass in an event like here. So the first thing we want to do, we only want to accept GET request, because we really don't want to screw up any POST request. So to do that, we can just say if event request method isn't GET, we're just going to return. So we aren't going to do anything. And then we're going to create this function, which we're going to name async function respond. And when we're done with all of this, so I don't forget, I'm going to say event respond with. So this is a new method. We're just going to say respond. So we're going to invoke this function here. And let me just see. Okay, this is it. Alright, so first we want to get the URL and cache. And how can we do that? Well, we can just say const URL. We can create a new URL and we can get all the URLs, right, from the GET request. We can say event request URL. And then let me just comment this out and I'm going to show you. So we're going to say URL. And now that we have this registered, so inside this application panel, we're going to press escape. So this is going to open the console. And let me just see, we should get this new one. Actually, let me just activate this one. And now you're going to see, and let me see. Oh, of course, I didn't invoke it. Okay, let's just do not resolve path. Let's just say respond. Cool, so now again, we're going to get this updated service worker. And now this is updated, so let me just refresh everything. And as you can see, now this picks up everything like a vacuum cleaner. So it just, here is all the requests. As you can see, here we have some things that is undesirable. So this includes Chrome extensions, right? So it's going to pick that up also. So we actually have to filter that out. But yeah, let's just continue so I can show you what I mean. So we get the URL, right? And then we also want the cache. So you can say const cache. Away, so we're using this caches API, right? So this really isn't imported from anything. Again, we can use this API, caches, open, and then we can just pass our cache. That's it, boom. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, let me just make some space. So we're going to serve build files from the cache. So we're going to say if assets includes, and we can just pass URL path name. How awesome is this? So we can say const cached response, and we can say cache. We can use this API, cache match the URL by the path name. Boom. And now we can say if cache response, then we can say return cache response. And that's how simple that is. So here is going to be actually our offline mode. So again, we're in the same function respond. So now we're going to include a try catch block here. We just do this, we can say catch like this. Awesome, so now we want to try the network first. So try the network first, right? And we can do this by saying const response, and we can say await fetch, and we can just pass it the request that we get. So now we can actually check the status of this. If it's okay, then we can continue, right? Otherwise, we're going to serve the cached assets. And remember how I told you that we need to filter out those other undesirable URLs like extensions? Well, let's just create some variables. We can say const is not extension, and we can do this by checking if the URL protocol equals to HTTP. That's it, boom, done. Let me just put this here. And then we can also say is success. So we're going to compare the response status if it's equal to 200. So that's the OK status. And easy. Now we can say if is not extension and is success. So now we can add this to the cache. So the first time the user loads the app, it's going to be online, right? Because we can just put it offline immediately. They need to first download the assets and we need to store them inside the cache. So now we can say cache put, and we can say event request. And then we can use this interesting API. So we just really want to literally clone the response. So it's the same. So we can say response clone. And again, I'm not making any of this up. This is the same code example as you can read in the SvelteKit documentation. Cool. So now when all of this is done, we can just return the response. So now when the user opens or hits our app, whatever, first we're going to download and cache all of the assets that we can, right? And then if they're offline, so we can progressively enhance the app, so we can use a fallback. So we can say fallback to cache. And then you can use actually the same code, const cache response, await cache, we can use match, and we can pass it the URL. So we're caching all of these things by the URL, and then we can say, okay, is this URL in the cache? Okay, serve it. If cache response, return cache response. And then at the end, I wrote this just because of TypeScript, because it's going to complain. So again, we're still in this function respond, right? So before this function is done, we actually just want to return another response if none of this is true. So we can say return new response, and we can say not found, and we can pass it something like status 404. So that's just the TypeScript doesn't complain, because now when we uncomment event respond with, if you didn't have this line, it would complain. It would say, okay, this returns undefined or whatever. So we're just going to give it what it expects. All right, so let's see. I'm going to update all of this, and you're going to see, let me just refresh everything. So for good measure, and now you're going to see our cache is expected. So all of our assets are cached here. Let me just see. Sometimes it disappears. I don't know why. Just refresh. That doesn't matter. But let me just go here, and you're going to see it might not work because For service workers to work regularly, they usually just work in production, right? But in this case, we're just using some magic under the hood to make this possible in development. So don't be surprised if you hit, for example, offline and it doesn't work, because that's kind of expected, right? But as you can see, in this case, it works, but we have some issue here. But the best way to fix something like this, let me just go to our app, open your terminal. So build your app. So in my case, I can using pnpm. I'm going to say pnpm run build. So now give this a second. Also, when that is done, just run your preview. So in this place, I'm going to say pnpm run preview, and this should start your app at another port, which is 4173. And this is going to register again this service worker. And again, we're not offline, so we're going to cache all of this. You're going to see it's going to install it. Let's just do it like this. You can see here is our cache. So here is our entire build, our files, right? So it's going to cache this. As you can see, this really isn't small because I'm using FFmpeg. So if I go to the storage, here we loaded 32 megs, right? And then when we go here, now we can say offline, and let's see if this works. And you also get sometimes this weird thing. So what I found out is you just need to have to refresh, and it has to load these things in the network tab, right? And then when you go here, press offline, you're going to see it works. So don't panic, just refresh things. Sometimes things take to initialize, download, and etc. It can be a lot of things. So actually, how cool is this? We're offline friends, right? How awesome is this? So let me actually just open this and let's see if it works the same as before. Boom, I can drop in my video and I can start converting. How beautiful is this, friends? But actually, let me just cancel that. Alright, friends, how awesome is this? But how do you notify the user that there's an update in your app? And you've probably seen those messages where they ask you to reload the app because there's a new update, and that's what you're going to do. So if you go here to this course, you can go to update, and to be honest, it's really not that straightforward. There's really no simple explanation online when you look something simple like this, but the simplest thing you can do is detect an update. So you can do this inside your Svelte app, and then you can do here whatever you want. You can also use push notifications, but that's really a lot more involved. So let me just really show you the simplest thing you can do. So inside of our code here, I'm just going to kill this and I'm going to start the development server. So let me just close this, and then I'm going to press Ctrl P in my editor. I'm going to open layout, and inside of here, I'm just going to include this detect service worker update code. So I'm going to make some space here, and I'm going to create a function, async function, detect service worker update. So we're going to say first registration. So we're going to see if it's registered. We can say await. We can use the navigator browser API, service worker ready. So we're going to see if the service worker is ready. Awesome. So now we can use this registration to add an event listener, which is going to be update found. And then we're going to pass a callback here. And inside of here, we can just create a variable new service worker. So new SV. And then we can say registration installing. And then for that new service worker, when it's installing, so we can notify the user, we're going to say add event listener. And then we can also listen for state change. And we're going to pass another callback. It's starting to look like a pyramid. So we can say if new service worker state. So we can compare the state. We're going to say, okay, is this thing installed? Then it's probably ready, right? And there you go. So now you can include whatever logic you need. You can make a pop-up and etc. I'm just going to use the confirm API. So I'm just going to say if confirm, and I'm going to say new update available, reload to update, question mark. And then if the answer is positive, then we can say window, not local storage, location, reload. So we're just going to reload the tab. But you're going to see there's going to be a problem with this, but for right now it works. So we actually need to invoke this function. So I'm going to import on mount from Svelte. So you can see it's imported here at the top. And then we can just say detect service worker update. Cool. So let me just save everything. And remember, here is the build. So we have to go through development. Awesome. Let me just reload everything. I'm just going to turn off offline. As you can see, there's an update. So let's do that. Awesome. So now when we refresh this, now we can go to our service worker and let's just say console log hi. So now you're going to see it's going to ask us if we want to reload to update. And that's the simplest way you can do, but you're going to see there's going to be a problem. So if you remember at the start, I told you about the conditions that are required to activate the service worker. So if you just reload the tab, it's not going to work, right? Because that's not how it works. You have to actually close the tab. So the service worker has to be done with everything that's going on. And then it's going to work if you create a new tab. So let me just close this tab. I'm going to drag it back over here. And then I'm just going to open the network tab application. As you can see, our service worker is installed. Well, that's inconvenient. So how can we fix that? And the fix is actually really simple. So we can go back here to our layout and we can just modify this code slightly. So we can post a message to the service worker. So you can say new service worker post message, and then you can give it a type. So you can name this banana. I'm going to name it skip waiting. So that's how we're going to do that. All right, so if I save this and now back to the service worker, I'm just going to say self add event listener. We're going to listen to a message. We get back the event. And now we're going to say if event data and event data type. So this is the type that you gave it. If it's skip waiting, then we can use this API. We can say self skip waiting. So that's the same thing in the GUI that we clicked on, just we can use it here using code. All right, so now we can save this. And now let's see if we do this. And if we refresh, you're going to see our service worker is activated. How beautiful is that, friends? All right, so in the last part, let's look at how we can make our app installable. And again, we can just look at this beautiful guide. What we need first is a web app manifest. So this is going to give the information to the browser how to display your content or how it's going to look inside of an app. So you're going to see it's just a JSON file, and then you have all of these options so you can see what they do. You can provide an icon. They show you here how to do that using mass icons. And we're going to use the Vite PVA asset generator. So we're going to generate this icon so you don't have to think about this. And let me just really show you how this looks like. So we can go here to the code. I'm actually going to close these tabs because we're done with this. And I'm going to collapse source. And now you add a manifest file. So to add the manifest file, go to your static folder. You're going to say new file, and then let's just add manifest.json. And this is going to get picked up. So that's really it. And there's really a bunch of fields that you can include, but let's just keep it simple. I'm just going to say name, and this is JSON, so we have to do name, SvelteKit PVA. So there's also going to be a short name. So this is all going to show inside your app. And then we can give it the start URL. So this tells where your app starts. Our app starts at the root, so really nothing different here. Now for the display, you can say standalone. And again, if you look at this beautiful course here, they explain all of these things. So I think it's in app design. Let's look here. So you can see here display modes, and they explain all of these things. So this is the standalone, so it's going to open this window. Then you have also the full screen experience and the minimal user experience. So you can look into that and you can do what suits your needs, right? And you can include some things like the background color. So this is going to show, this is going to be the splash before your CSS loads, I think. So we can give it a color like this. You can say 17191C. So this is just going to be a cool gray. And then you can also give it a theme color. So this is going to be the border of this. So when you look at this, it's also going to show on your phone when you look at the navigation bar at the top, is going to change the color. So that looks really cool. All right, so I can say theme color, and I can also give it a hex value. So I can say FF3F20. And you can also include a description, of course. And I'm going to say WebM to MP4 video converter. That's it. And there's a bunch of fields you can add. You can look into that, but the last field I just want to add are going to be icons, and that's going to be it. All right, so that's really tedious to generate yourself. So we can use the CLI from the Vite PVA, and I'm going to include this link in the description as always. You can see here, you can install it. I don't want to install it actually. I just want to use the CLI, so we can use npx. You can even add it here to your scripts. So you can add this generate PVA assets, and then you can say npx whatever. But let me show you actually what I'm going to do. So here inside, I just put this icon. I actually just downloaded the Svelte SVG icon because SVGs are really awesome and flexible, so you can create any icon from this. And you can use SVGs, PNGs for your icons, but yeah, so you can do a lot with that. As you can see here, I have this logo.svg, which is really just the Svelte icon, and then I'm going to open the terminal. We can say npx, and now I'm going to say npx @vite-pva/assets generator, and then we can pass it this preset minimal, and then you can pass it the path to your logo or whatever else you have. In this case, my logo lives in static/logo.svg. Boom is going to ask me if it wants to be installed, which already done is because I used this before, and boom, that's how simple that is. So now it's going to generate all of these files. So I'm just going to run the development server, and we can just populate these icons here. So if I go here to the icons, you can just pass whatever you want. I'm just going to say source. We can say PVA 64 by 64. It's a PNG, right? And then you can say type here, image/PNG. And then you have sizes. So I can say 64 by 64. And then I can just copy this 2 times more because I'm just going to use 2 icons, which is not important. Just do this. And then I'm going to have 192. And that's going to be it. And for the last one, I'm going to use 512. Just copy this. And beautiful. So now we actually need to open app.html in Svelte. So you can press Ctrl P in your editor. And you can say app.html. So we have to include it here in the head. And now we can go here and we can include another link. So this is going to be link rel manifest. And we can use the same type of thing here. So you can use this %sign where the SvelteKit assets are. SvelteKit assets, so this is your static folder. And then we can say /manifest JSON. And now when you go to your app, so I started the development server, right? And let me just refresh for good measure. So now let me just make this wider. And now you can go to your manifest here. Let me just also reload. And this is going to be all of your information. So if you do something wrong, you're going to see it here. Let me just collapse this. So as you can see, here is our name, SvelteKit PVA, short name, and etc. description. We can see here is our theme color, background color, start URL, orientation, and you can see all of our icons look great. So you can change this however you want. And that's basically it. So now your app is installable. If you didn't see it already, here is this icon for installing it. So you can install the SvelteKit PVA. But in my case, first, remember as before, first I'm going to build the app. I'm going to say build, and let me just say and npm run preview. Cool, so now this is going to start. And if I go here to my page, 4173, you can see everything works. This thing is registered. So now we can just install this. If we go here to this button, we can say install app SvelteKit PVA. You can say install, boom. And now this is going to open like a regular app, right? How beautiful is this? So now I can drag my file and etc. do whatever I want. And then if you want to get rid of it, here, depending on how your UI looks like, you can just go here and say uninstall SvelteKit PVA, and it's going to remove it. But yeah, that's basically it, right, friends? And how beautiful is this? So that's basically how you make a progressive web app with Svelte. Of course, you can do a lot more, but I'm going to leave these resources to you so you can learn more how to achieve what you want. Alright, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can also support me by becoming a patron. Thank you for watching, and catch you in the next one. Peace!